Welcome to the Michigan Association of Secondary School Principals New and Improved podcast series featuring great discussions, insight, and resources on all things related to education and administration.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the MASSP podcast series. I am Ryan Cayce, and I am excited to be having our guest join us today for our third episode of Season 3, and that is Judy Williams, who's going to be talking with us on behalf of MSCA.
Hey, Ryan, great. Can't believe that we're already, November 8th? This school year is going so quickly. It just passes before our eyes before we really realize where we are in it.
Absolutely. And Judy, I know you have a wealth of background and experiences. Do you mind just sharing for our listeners kind of what it is you do and your relationship with MSCA and what the organization does?
Absolutely. I come to MSCA after over 3 decades in education, the majority of which as a school counselor, K-12 experience in some small rural districts, but the primary role that I played was that of an elementary and middle school counselor here in Michigan. And in 2016, I was given a phenomenal opportunity to become a counselor educator at Grand Valley State University. So I'm now educating, along with my partner, Dr. Sean Baltzma, the next generation of school counselors, but that's also afforded me the opportunity to get involved in leadership in the Michigan School Counselor Association. And so a little bit about MSCA. We are the representative voice for school counselors in the state of Michigan. We're about 426 members strong, hoping to increase that by at least 25% this coming year. We provide professional development through our spring and fall conferences. We just finished our fall conference a couple weeks ago. And we're also going to be involved in some great collaboratives, just like the one we've got with MASSP now, as well as some other mental health related initiatives. And then through our work with Capital Services in Lansing, MSCA represents school counseling as a profession on legislative issues. And with the recent number of new freshman legislators in the state, and the initiatives in regard to mental health and the Marshall Plan, there's a lot of work to do in partnership with our elected officials.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in with some questions here, Judy. In your opinion, what is the role of the school counselor in today's setting, and how has this role maybe changed over the last decade or two? And is there anything that's still missing, in your opinion?
That's a long question. I'll try to think to my answer, because it is such an important message to be able to convey. If you look at comprehensive preventative development school counseling today, it really is focused on a multi-tiered system of support in a data-driven program where school counselors work with all students in a school. And ideally, that's PK through 12. Now, that is in the areas of social emotional development. We know the emphasis on post-secondary planning and career development through the Marshall Plan and the skills gap in our state and nationwide. And then also academic. School counselors are educators with a specialization in counseling. And so what we look to do is provide those school counseling curriculum lessons that are developmental and preventative in nature for all students. And just like any MTSS support program, those students that need more may be served by small groups. Some students may need that individual, more short-term solution-focused counseling. And then we also work in referrals, consultation, and collaboration with outside professionals to really form a strong safety net for all students. Now, with that being said, Ryan, what I've kind of, in my work across the state and in talking with administrators and teachers, and legislators and stakeholders across all domains, there still seems to be a lack of awareness that this is not your parent's guidance counselor anymore. And one request, it would be to erase the term guidance counselor out of everybody's vocabulary, because that's an antiquated term and really doesn't describe what we do. And it seems that sometimes, which is very natural to understand, the perception of an individual school counselor is the last school counselor they encountered. And so if that subscribes to the test coordinator, master scheduler, almost administrative or administrative support person type of a position, then that's what the job is still perceived as. But we now occupy a position of leadership, of data-driven analysis, to be able to come alongside the mission and vision of a school district and provide those programs that are evidenced by data that are going to drive that success for the students in a school and help promote the mission and vision of a school as a whole educational entity. Now, with that being said, what is still missing? What I'm seeing, and this is a concern, is that we're losing the holistic vision of a student. School counselors are master degree professionals, and we're seeing an increased number of interventionalists or advisors coming into schools, all of whom do great work, but school counselors understand that a child, an individual, cannot be segmented into a career piece or an academic piece or a behavior piece. We are, if you will, the person who sees that Venn diagram, that center part of a Venn diagram, and understand how a social emotional issue may impact a senior from getting that FAFSA completed or those college apps out because of issues they're dealing with from the home environment, or how a student who's struggling academically may be impacted by anxiety or depression. And so we really are the professionals in the school who are able to take that holistic view and understand how all those components come together.
I've always kind of felt like school counselors, in a way, are like principals. They have to be not just jacks of all trades, but masters of all trades, because for those reasons you just said, there's so many things that go into their duties that, and as you just mentioned, maybe some of the career stuff and the choices the students are making, the things they're struggling with, are actually because of social emotional needs, and that those things, you can't just separate them and categorize them, because you're talking about the 360-degree picture of the whole child. And I know, I'm sure from my experiences working in schools, that counselors, there's a lot of things they want to do, but it's just how much time is in a day, and based on all the tasks that are assigned. You and I haven't mentioned yet, I'm sure we could all day talk about the school ratio of a counselor to student ratio and what that is in Michigan, and financial resources available to improve. But it's definitely such an important role in a school. And from my roles when I was a principal, being on the same page, having a strong counseling team was so beneficial to me and to our staff, and then obviously the students too.
Well, and it's so good to hear you recognize that value, because it is so essential. And we know that Michigan is 49th in the nation in regard to school counselor to student ratio. And is that an issue? Absolutely, it's an issue. But the other piece that will increase access to school counseling for all students is when school counselors are relieved of the inappropriate duties. That if you're spending X amount of time on MSCA prep or SAT prep or scheduling, that's taking you away from directly working with students. Mm-hmm. And the golden time allotment that the American School Counselor Association advocates for is that 80% of the school counselor's time is in direct service to students, whether that be through responsive services, school counseling curriculum in classrooms, or individual advisement in planning for students. 20% should be in that collaboration, school support, consultation, referral, fair share responsibilities.
And I would challenge any of our listeners right now, especially our administrators who might be listening to this, to think about what you just said, that 80-20 rule, and think for themselves, what percentage do they think they're counselors are spending on that category in the left versus category in the right, and to even follow up with their counselors and ask them what they are doing. Because I think they might be surprised to find out how either close or far away they are from that 80-20 guideline.
And I know that we want to talk primarily about mental health today, but just to finish up kind of this segment of the conversation, the American School Counselor Association has very valuable tools as far as use of time assessments, annual agreements that are done in the spring of each year between each counselor in a building and the administrator, where those specific issues are addressed. And then, because I know the evaluation of school counselors can be somewhat tricky, the Michigan School Counselor Association actually has an evaluation tool that is available now both in Pivot and Stages that is directly reflective of that use of time and annual agreement work that's been done, so that school counselors are then evaluated according to where their time has been allotted. And that comes out of dialogue between that super valuable team of administrator and school counselor.
That's an excellent resource you just mentioned. So hopefully people will take advantage of that. Focusing on, student mental health, it seems like there are just more and more violent acts that occur in schools all the time, each and every year. Is it simply a student mental health issue? And other than the obvious building safety and security strategies, what can schools do to promote positive mental health systems and supports?
And I think not all, but you have to have that strong foundation of prevention. And having been an elementary counselor for so many years, understanding those basic skills that we were teaching even our youngest students on how to handle strong feelings, on conflict resolution, on assertive communication. Now the work that's being done in restorative justice and restorative circles, and knowing how to employ mindfulness and self-talk. Mm-hmm. That's such an important component. And until that layer is in place, and that also then allows us as school counselors and educators as a whole to identify those students early on who are starting to exhibit some of those very basic symptoms of maybe anxiety or depression, behavioral issues, so that we can get them the help they need early on. And that may be in the form of a small counseling group on anger management, as opposed to letting these symptoms fester to where we have the full-blown issues that erupt. We just saw was actually during our fall conference when 3 schools in the Grand Rapids area had received bomb threats. And that was all traced back to a student not in Michigan, but in another state who was trying to get even with a student in Michigan. And so, we have these very complex networks today of how students are connected. But if you look at the role of the school counselor and working with all schools and being able to lay that groundwork, being able to have this early intervention framework where we are collaborating with our teachers who see these students every single day. We collaborate with our administrators, our parents, bring them into the fold early on. And we start to normalize and remove the stigma from mental health. Then we're able to look at this as we're concerned about the academic development of students, but in order to develop academically and be able to be a healthy citizen of our country, we need to be able to get a handle on these mental health issues early on. And all the safety and security, the fortifying of the perimeters, yeah, that's important. But we have to take care of the greatest resource in those buildings, and that's making sure that our students have a strong mental health foundation from which to build.
And you mentioned some really good strategies and some things schools are doing, and I'm pretty sure it seems like I've read it online or on Twitter what it is. It sounds like a lot of schools are actually looking at adjusting their curriculum, and not, obviously in maybe the areas of health, but even beyond that, really trying to put a focus on mental health as well, beyond just a tiny little unit that they do once as a freshman or a seventh grader.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up, because for all the time, I used to be very involved in bully violence prevention work when I was an elementary counselor. And when I would go out and train students, parents, teachers, I would emphasize that this is not a one and done program, that it has to be the way you do business on a daily basis. Because otherwise, and unfortunately we see this in our society, a big event happens, we're all about it, and then it fades back into the woodwork. Mental health is just another component of our physical health. They're all interrelated, and it's work that has to be done every day to maintain it and support it.
Absolutely. Restorative practices have been a popular topic in Michigan the last couple of years. It's been mentioned, obviously, in new legislation that's passed and things like that. What is a school's counselor role in these practices?
You know, those are skills as far as group facilitation, understanding group dynamics, that fall right into the wheelhouse of a school counselor. We understand relationships. We understand the need for creating a safe, confidential environment. We are skilled in how to facilitate groups that allow for self-disclosure, but yet protect identity and protect the student who might not be as open to sharing. And so, I referenced earlier the bringing in of so many outside professionals. Again, this is another example of school counselors are already trained in this type of practice. It's just allowing them to have the specific training, which is appropriate professional development training for school counselors, as opposed to those that are wonderful trainings for teachers, to be able to employ these practices and support them, whether it's teachers who do restorative circles in their classes, or if we're looking at restorative practices for students who have been facing perhaps disciplinary issues and bringing them back into the school environment through a lens of learning and processing, as opposed to merely punitive discipline.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I know you mentioned that as well. Just, it seems like so many schools that are trying to be proactive with their response to student mental health and the needs of students, and those that are being proactive are probably and there's a lot of schools that have been doing this for years already, have been implementing restorative practices. It seems like it's just such a very beneficial practice to utilize the strengths of the school counselor for the reasons you mentioned back when we first started the conversation, and the 80-20 rule, and where do you see the more bang for your buck, even based on the benefits that you will see in regards to your students when you let a school counselor be part of things that are impactful, directly working with teachers or with students face to face, versus some of those things that are behind the scenes on the computer that you mentioned. So, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me, but I think for a lot of maybe principals or schools, they're just not quite sure how to get going and get started on that. And I know there's a lot of different opportunities out there, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, in terms of professional development that are available for them to get started.
Absolutely.
Tough question here, Judy. What is one or two things? So it's going to be hard to narrow it down, I think, that all principals or administrators should know about school counselors, and how can we do a better job of supporting them?
One thing that we didn't talk about earlier, Ryan, that I think is important is that school counselors come to the profession with a couple different credentials. One being a school counselor license and one being the NT endorsement on the teacher certificate. Regardless of what credential they bring with them, they come with the same training. And so these school counselors have the ability to look at a school's data, to be able to dig into that school improvement plan and show through a needs assessment, through outcome data, how students are different as a result of the school counseling program. And that's all data. We know, administrators are all about data. There's so much that has to be given to the state every year. We come alongside that and support that. And there has been research done that shows that test scores, attendance, behavior are all positively impacted by comprehensive developmental school counseling programs. Now, with that being said, you asked for one or two, so I'll try to be short on this. One is, it's interesting. I presented to an ed leadership class not too long ago on the role of the school counselor and all about evaluating school counselors. And one of the students said, I said, if you have a magic wand, what would you do when you went back to work on Monday? And they said, I would look at all these other professionals we have, and I would hire one school counselor instead, because they bring all those skills to the table. And I think that's an important piece to look at. Also, support appropriate duties for school counselors, but school counselor appropriate professional development. We now know that through recent legislation, school counselors have to have 50 hours of career and college professional development to renew their certification beginning in 2020. Helping them to take advantage of those opportunities, attending conferences, maybe hosting a district professional development where someone is brought in. I know MSCA is looking at a spring-summer conference where we're going to utilize the phenomenal services of our armed services to be able to hopefully address those 5 professional development hours that have to be attained just in the military. Mm-hmm. Especially the beginning of the school year, when especially in a secondary environment, school counselors are busy doing schedule changes. Many times they're taken out to attend teacher professional development. What if you looked at tweaking that and allowed them to do the work that needs to be done to start the school year smoothly for students, get them in the right classes first day of school, and then provide that environment for them to learn about restorative practices from the school counseling perspective, be able to attend professional development on career development or anxiety, whatever is available or what meets the needs of the goals of each school counselor.
And so, Judy, are some of those things you just mentioned, I know this podcast is coming out after you had your fall conference. So is that something that certain topics would be beneficial then for school counselors to come to the MSCA fall conference each year?
Oh, absolutely. We know that the next theme is going to be Pathways to the Future. We don't yet have our keynotes or our sessions, but we know that there will be specific sessions that will be identified for those professional development hours in the college awareness advisement segment and the career development segment as well. And I also would invite an administrator to come attend our conference or to come present, maybe even come in with their school counselor if they've got a really strong team, to be able to show that this can be done, and it can even be done on limited funding, because we know that that's an issue.
Plus, I'm assuming it keeps them abreast on, legislative changes. Obviously, I'm going to have to imagine I wasn't able to attend your conference this fall, but I'm assuming a little bit of time was spent talking about the Marshall Plan and some of the new requirements, because a lot of that's going to directly fall on the shoulders of counselors.
Oh, and you know what, Ryan, I'm really glad you brought that up, because what can administrators do to support school counselors? Invite them to the table. That one of the things we're called to do is to be leaders. And we bring knowledge that's many educators have, but we're able to communicate it well. And if a district is looking at how they're going to implement the Marshall Plan, whether it's the educational development plans that students have to do, whether they're part of a talent consortium, counselors understand career development theory. They are able to utilize like My Bright Futures or career cruising and work with all students from the very earliest ages, if you have elementary counselors, to start building that repertoire of potential lifelong career options for students. And I think it's also important to start working with parents early on to help them understand the number of options and availability of careers there are for their children. Because whether you're in northern Michigan or you're in the Detroit area, what you know is typically what you're most exposed to.
Absolutely.
And our area in Michigan, Grand Rapids, we've got cranes popping up all over in the skyline. The number of careers are building just as rapidly, I think, as sometimes the buildings in this area are. Our students today are preparing for careers that don't even exist yet.
Yeah, that's a great line, because that's absolutely true. So we have the fall conference for MSCA. I know MASSP and MSCA, we are in the beginning stages of working on a partnership to also provide some learning opportunities, ones that would actually be online as part of our digital learning network that MASSP has put together. So hopefully sometime down the road in the near future, we're going to be able to have some courses, different learning opportunities where not just principals, counselors, any educators can learn about some strategies to support student mental health. And I know that's a vague term to say, because we know there's a lot of things that encompass student mental health, just to positively impact and support students, whether it's for a teacher in the classroom, strategies that they can use, or the entire building and the building culture from more of the counselor or administrator level. It's going to be exciting to work together, so I'm thankful for that on behalf of MASSP. I'm thankful for that opportunity, and it'll be exciting to see what we're able to come up with over the winter months into the spring.
I 100% agree with that, Ryan, because what I'm sensing is such a strong desire for educators to come across their job descriptions or their titles and really bond together, because we understand how diverse needs are for our students, that we're starting to let go of those titles to some extent and really reach out to the various specializations that each component of a school bring to the table. Mm-hmm. And when we can do that, when students are successful, schools are successful.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we're excited for that. So, Judy, as we're wrapping up here, do you want to share, I don't know if you're on Twitter at all, or if you want to share either your email address or Twitter handle, anything like that. So if anybody was listening, they has some questions either about MSCA, the fall conference, or just the topic of counseling and student mental health, that they can use that to reach out to you.
I would say probably Twitter is the very best to contact me with, and that's at Judy Williams 77.
At Judy Williams 77. And does MSCA have a Twitter handle as well?
Yeah, they do, and it is at the MSCA. And we are also on Facebook, the Michigan School Counseling Association. So please feel free to like us.
Excellent. Well,
we've got a great motivated board ready to do great work for the school counselors, and most importantly, the students of Michigan, and being able to enter into these collaboratives like we are with you all. And that's really exciting stuff. I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us, Judy. And for everybody listening, you have the contact info. If you want to learn more, remember Season 3 of the MASSP podcast is in full swing. We have more episodes coming out each month, and Principal Teresa Stager from Saline High School will be joining me on the next couple. So we're excited to have her back. And thanks again for listening, everybody, and have a great day.